Afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Bill is off today. Republican U.S. Senate candidate Eric Hovde still refusing today to concede in his attempt to unseat Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin, who claimed victory last week. Baldwin leads with more than 29,000 votes, which is within the 1% margin, giving Hovde the option to request a recount, which he would have to pay for. Chief political reporter Jason Zimmerman continues to follow this story. He's live in the studio with a first alert update. Jason.
Cami, as we've been reporting, Eric Hovde released a video speaking for the first time since results flipped against him in the early morning hours after the November 5th vote. He's blaming Democrats for running a phony candidate who aligned himself with Donald Trump and baseless claims so far about the electoral process in Milwaukee County. Hovde's video was posted on the social media site X on Tuesday afternoon, in which he's seen telling supporters he's still considering whether to request a recount. However, just after releasing the video, Hovde told WISN Radio in Milwaukee he lost the election, saying it's the most painful loss he's ever experienced. Democrats in response point out that it appears the third-party candidate, Thomas Leger, received slightly less votes than Baldwin was able to win by. Here's what Hovde said.
It is one thing to lie to voters through TV ads like "I'm a Californian" or "I want to ban abortion" or ban beer. It is another to fund and organize a false candidate to manipulate voters.
Meanwhile, the Wisconsin Elections Commission is still in the process of finalizing the canvass. And today, the chair, who's also a member of the Democrat Party, defended Milwaukee County, saying clerks there had a lot of absentee ballots to count, and the process can't legally begin until 7 a.m. on Election Day.
Everyone in Wisconsin knew going into this election that that was going to be completed most likely in the very early morning hours of November 6th. We talked about it. We did press about it. And when it happened, it was not a surprise. It was expected.
Senator Tammy Baldwin has already claimed victory, giving a speech last week to supporters in Madison. Cami, back to you.